It's no secret that the Pittsburgh Steelers need to make some changes in the wide receiver room, and they probably need to add another receiver before the NFL trade deadline here during the 2024 NFL season. So today, we're going to go over all of the Steelers' options, what options they have at their disposal. Could they trade George Pickens? Which wide receivers are going to be on the market that they should go pursue? We're going to break it all down here on today's edition of Steelers Talk. I am your host, Jack Sperry. Thank you so much for spending part of your Wednesday talking some Steelers football with us. And make sure you guys stay tuned because we got some great news in terms of the Steelers' chances of landing superstar wide receiver Davante Adams in the coming week or so. So make sure you guys stay tuned for what that great news is from Adam Schefter from ESPN. But before we get into the content today, subscribe today because if the Steelers make a trade for a wide receiver, if they trade away George Pickens, if they make a trade for anybody else, we're going to be going live with a breaking news live show right here on the channel. We're going to have a lot of fun, instant analysis right here on the show. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button right now if you haven't already, because whenever the con artist strikes, we're going to be going live. Okay, now, there's no way around it here, folks. After what we've seen from the Steelers wide receiver room here through the first 5 weeks of the 2024 NFL season, if they want to win a championship this year, okay, they need to add a legit number 2 receiving option or potentially even somebody that's better than George Pickens, because you look at what they have right now, and, let's just say it's lackluster, especially at the wide receiver 2 spot. George Pickens has had effort issues lately. Van Jefferson isn't getting open, isn't creating any separation. Calvin Austin III is getting open. He's one of the only guys on this team that is getting open, but he's not getting the football nearly enough, and then the reserves are just not good enough. Roman Wilson, I don't think is fully healthy, and he's not getting on the field. So listen, man, this is definitely an issue that needs to be addressed by the time the Steelers potentially try to make a playoff run. And right now they have a pretty limited cap space, all right? Just over $10 million in available cap for this season. So that definitely limits the total options that the Steelers have at their disposal in terms of what they can do at the wide receiver position. And what this pretty much means is because you only have about $10 million at your disposal, you can only add one receiver, all right? Like, I've thrown the idea out there that maybe you trade George Pickens and you trade for 2 receivers. Turns out that's actually really difficult because George Pickens, you don't really get that much cap relief by trading him, and then you bring in 2 receivers and you only have $11 million to do that. It's just not really feasible. So right now I think that the Steelers pretty much just have room for one more receiver, and they need to be very careful about which receiver they decide to bring in. In terms of the options, I think these are probably the top 6 options that the Steelers have to work with here. Davante Adams is the top of my list here. We're going to go into him here in just a second in detail. Also, DeAndre Hopkins is somebody I would love to see the Steelers pick up. I think he really fits this culture, and I think he fits skill set-wise with what Arthur Smith wants to do. Courtland Sutton, especially if the Steelers go to Russell Wilson, I think Courtland Sutton would be an excellent option if the Denver Broncos end up selling at the deadline. Then also Christian Kirk, Mike Williams, and Darius Slayton are also names to monitor when it comes to the wide receiver trade market. I have a feeling the Steelers are going to land one of these 6 wide receivers before the end of the NFL trade deadline this year. And, I think that, when you talk about Davante Adams, I think that he is my preferred choice out of any receiver on the market. And I have a myriad of reasons why I think that the Steelers should be very aggressive in trying to land this superstar wide receiver and then rework his deal to keep him here in Pittsburgh for the next 2+ seasons after this year. First of all, I think that he's just the best overall talent at wide receiver on the open market right now. He's only 31 years old, and I know some people are going to be like, Jack, he's aging. He's 31 years old, but man, he is still at the top of his game. You watch him on film, he's still creating a lot of separation. He's still really good at the catch point, all these different things, and he brings such an awesome blend of size, route running, and ball skills that this offense could really use. He would be the number 1 receiver in this offense the second he steps in. And then also the cap hit for this season is very manageable for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It would take up pretty much all of the remaining cap for this season, and the Pittsburgh Steelers might still have to do a little bit of maneuvering here, but I think that Davante Adams is more than worth that investment in this season, and then you probably have to give him a rework deal if you want to keep him here in Pittsburgh long term, which is what the Steelers want to do, and I think you'd have to pay him about at least around $28 million per season to keep him here past this year. But honestly, I think he's worth that investment. He is a hell of a player. I think he fits this offense perfectly. If the Steelers want to go try and win a championship in this current era of Steelers football, Davante Adams is a piece that can certainly get you closer to that. But the thing is here, the big thing that you have to keep in mind is that Davante Adams needs to agree to come to Pittsburgh and take that rework deal, right? It's very possible that Davante Adams is saying, you know what, I don't really want to go to Pittsburgh and I don't want to stay there long term. I'm in my prime right now, but that's not going to last forever. I mean, this team that he gets traded to next is probably going to be his last shot to really be a key contributor as a number one receiver on a championship team. So if he doesn't feel the Pittsburgh Steelers bring that, then I don't think he's going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler, because the Steelers just aren't going to make that investment in him if he's just going to be a one-year rental. But keep in mind here, the longer that we go here, where Adams is not traded this week, because the Steelers do play the Raiders this week, so it's very possible that the Raiders don't want to deal Davante Adams to the black and gold because he'd be playing against them this week, right? So the longer we go without a Davante Adams trade to the Steelers this week, I think the better the chances are that the Steelers end up acquiring him. And in some good news today, Adam Schefter on the Pat McAfee show says he doesn't expect a trade this week. And this is what he had to say. We're now in Wednesday afternoon. The fact that there has been no Davante Adams trade this week would tell you any Davante Adams trade will wait another week now, because in the NFL, most every big move is going to occur Monday and Tuesday while teams are coming up with their game plans. And guys, this is incredible news for the Pittsburgh Steelers, because once we get into next week, the Raiders no longer have to worry about Davante Adams playing against them in that week's game. All right, so that's going to open up the possibilities for him to go to Pittsburgh, and the fact that he's probably not going to be dealt this week, I think definitely raises the chances that Davante Adams will be traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers either Monday or Tuesday of next week. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already, because we're going to be breaking it all down if he does end up getting traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, before we get into the rest of today's show, and coming up here, we're going to be talking about why the Pittsburgh Steelers can't trade George Pickens. But before we get into that, let's have a word from our sponsor here at Game Time, which is the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for the sports, music, comedy, and theater in your area. And guys, we all know that experiencing a sporting event, especially a football game live, is unlike anything you can get from watching the game on your couch. And lucky for you guys, Game Time is a brand new feature called Game Time Picks, which filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. It's super easy to use, guys. Just pull up the Game Time app. It's 100% free. You go to an event that you want to go see, and then you select the Game Time Picks button at the top of the screen, and it's automatically going to filter through every single ticket on their ticketing platform using their special AI analytics to find the best deals for you, the best seats at the best prices. And the best part is it saves you a bunch of time and really money, if we're being honest here, because you don't have to do the research of going on a bunch of different ticketing apps to get the best prices and the best seats available. And something I love about using the Game Time app, guys, it's the reason why it's the only ticketing app on my phone, is you get the lowest price guarantee on any ticket to any event, all-in pricing, so you don't get slapped with crazy fees at checkout, and flash deals so you can get even cheaper tickets the closer you wait to the event. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time today. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CHATSPORTS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, against just for the first purchase. Create an account with Game Time today and redeem code CHATSPORTS. That's one word, all caps, CHATSPORTS, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. So like I was saying, guys, I do think that Davante Adams could be going to the Pittsburgh Steelers early next week, either Monday or Tuesday. The news might even break on Monday Night Football, like a couple years ago when Christian McCaffrey was dealt to the San Francisco 49ers. It could be a very similar situation after the Steelers play the Las Vegas Raiders on Sunday here in Week 6. This is what I would probably expect a trade offer to look like here for the Pittsburgh Steelers in a trade package. You send a second-round pick. I do think that the Raiders really want that second-round pick, and if you're the Steelers, I'm willing to give that up, especially if you introduce a little bit of a pick swap here where you get a fourth-round pick back from the Raiders, but then you also send a fifth-round pick back to the Raiders. So you get the fourth-round pick, and they get the fifth-round pick. So let me know what you guys think about this trade offer right here in this trade package. Would you accept this trade if you're Steelers GM Omar Khan? Give me an A if you would accept it, or type D if you would decline it. Let me know what you guys are thinking down there in the comment section. For me, I think this is a steal for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So now let's get into why I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers can't trade George Pickens this year. And we talked about it a little bit earlier, right, with the money situation. The Steelers have limited funds, and if they are able to land Davante Adams, that's going to take up pretty much all of the rest of their cash reserves in terms of their cap this season. And I just don't think it would be smart to unload the only other legit fearable wide receiver option on your team right when you get Davante Adams and unload the other guy. I think that the whole point of getting Davante Adams is because you need another legit receiving weapon. So I'm not sure if it makes a ton of sense to unload a guy in George Pickens who is still very good, number one. And then also he's on a very team-friendly contract, which is definitely good for this football team. And it's tough to replace because if you unload him, you don't get much cap space back. So if you get a trade and you replace him with a different receiver like a John Mechie, it's going to have to be somebody on a very team-friendly contract, and that's going to be very difficult to find, in my opinion. And, you know, the fact that the Steelers don't have cap space here, guys, and the fact that they don't, or especially if they get Davante Adams, it's going to be an issue for the Pittsburgh Steelers in terms of trying to trade George Pickens away. The current cap hits on George Pickens' contract is something to be watching out for here because he is still on his rookie deal, right? And it is under $2 million this season, and then it is also just over $2 million next season. So the lack of cap space for the Pittsburgh Steelers plus GP's team-friendly contract here definitely puts a damper on the Steelers' chances of trading him this season. In my opinion, there's the current cap hits this year. They're just paying him, just under $2 million. Then next year, it's just over $2 million. And I think that the only way it makes sense for the Pittsburgh Steelers to trade George Pickens is that if you can get two receivers, right? So Davante Adams and another receiver, I don't think that's going to be the case here because of the money situation. So I think for the Pittsburgh Steelers, as much as we hate all of the effort issues with George Pickens and the attitude issues, I think for this season, I think you have to keep him on the roster, and I think that the money aspect of this thing, because George Pickens' contract is still so inexpensive, it makes it very difficult for you to find two receivers to trade for to replace George Pickens, and I really don't feel comfortable with just Davante Adams and trading George Pickens away. And here's another way to think about it, guys, okay? I think that, you can live with George Pickens' lack of effort and, kind of his attitude as a number two receiver. Davante Adams is going to bring his all every single snap that he is a Pittsburgh Steeler if the Steelers end up getting him. Same thing with DeAndre Hopkins. Same thing with any other receiver like a Cortland Sutton that they end up getting by the trade deadline. But George Pickens, he's somebody that's uber talented and will be one of the best wide receiver twos in the NFL, but if he shows up with bad effort and he's not blocking and doing all these things that he should be doing, you still have a legit number one receiver in your room that you can rely on week in and week out. And take a look at this potential wide receiver room for the Pittsburgh Steelers here, man. Davante Adams is your number one receiver, and don't kid yourself, he would be the number one receiver here if the Steelers end up trading for him. Then you got George Pickens as your number two. I mean, that is one of the most talented receiver twos in the league. Then you get Calvin Austin III, who I think has been underrated this season. I don't think Justin Fields has done a good enough job getting him the football, but he's getting open quite a bit on film. Then Pat Freiermuth is still a very reliable receiving threat option from the tight end position. So this is something that I could work with here. I think Justin Fields or Russell Wilson could work with that as well, especially if you're able to land Davante Adams. And why this is important, why it's important to get this second wide receiver. Why not just stick with Calvin Austin III and Van Jefferson and George Pickens? I think it's important to get that second wide receiver because not only does it help out the passing game and the quarterbacks because you have multiple receiving threats on the field, but it also forces the defense to focus in more on the passing attack, which of course opens up the run game. And that's how the Steelers want to win football games, man. They want to pound the rock, but right now they just have no threats on the perimeter at wide receiver other than George Pickens, who's only playing 50% of the offensive snaps at this point. So they can just put another guy in the box, load up the box, and that's why the Steelers' run game has been so bad. If you get a legit number two receiver in this offense like Davante Adams, that problem likely goes away. My prediction, though, although I don't think that George Pickens gets traded this season, I think he will be traded next offseason because Pickens, I know for a fact, views himself as a top 15 to top 10 type wide receiver in the National Football League. And next year, he'll be on the last year of his current rookie contract. And he just seems like the type of guy to me, man, that's going to want a new deal. All right, plain and simply, he's going to want to get paid as early as he possibly can. And if he can't, I think that he might either request a trade or the Pittsburgh Steelers might just say, hey, man, we're tired of your antics. We're tired of your lack of effort on film. We're going to trade you, and we're going to replace you next offseason. I actually think that's probably the most likely scenario. I think Pickens is going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler for the entirety of this 2024 season. I don't really see him being traded unless he demands a trade before the deadline. And then next offseason, I think, is the time where the Steelers will unload George Pickens. Now, in terms of the trade value for him, I think you can get an early day 3 pick. And that might seem low to a lot of people watching this show because we know how talented George Pickens is, but you also have to realize the team trading for him is going to be taking on a player that has known behavior issues, and plus they're probably going to have to pay him a brand new contract if they end up trading for him, all right? So I think that you can maybe get a 4th or a 5th round pick depending on how he plays the rest of the season. Maybe it goes up to a late day 2 pick, but I honestly don't think you're going to get a massive haul for a guy like George Pickens in a trade, whether now or in next offseason. So now, you be the GM. Let me know down there in the comments section. Would you trade George Pickens this season, or would you keep him for the rest of the year? Personally, I am keeping him to the end of the season, and then I'm probably trading him next offseason. But let me know what you guys are thinking. Type T if you would trade him now, or type K if you're going to keep him around, at least for now. Thank you guys for making it to the end of today's show. And it was a little bit of a longer one today, but there's a lot to talk about when it comes to this wide receiver position. There's a lot of ins and outs that you guys need to be aware of with the financial aspect of things, all this different stuff. But I definitely think that Adam Schefter report saying that Davante Adams likely won't get traded till next week is phenomenal news if you are a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. Right now, if I'd have to put a favorite on where Tay ends up going, I'd probably say the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's great news if you're a Steelers fan. That'll be it for today's show, guys. I really do appreciate your guys' support. Click that subscribe button because if that Davante Adams trade comes through here, we're going to be going live for a very long time right here on Steelers Talks. Make sure you click that subscribe button to never miss a breaking news story.